India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi says his country's relationship with Russia is based on mutual trust and respect. He's been addressing the Indian diaspora in Moscow during his two-day visit there. Later on Tuesday, he's due to be meeting with President Vladimir Putin. Now, Russia has had strong historical ties with India and also remains its major defence and oil supplier. Well, let's bring in Siddharth Vadarajan. He's the founding editor at the news and opinion website The Wire. He joins us now from New Delhi. Siddharth, I'm curious as to how this visit is being viewed in India, especially given the timing. There are obviously some deep ties here, but has the war in Ukraine changed any of that when it comes to public perceptions, especially as India continues to buy this cheap oil from Moscow?
I think the oil part is a bit of a red herring because anybody around the world who can get their hands on that oil, either directly or indirectly, is doing so. But I think that the Indian view, the sort of street view of what's happening on the Russia-Ukraine front reflects the sort of historic relationship between Russia and the Soviet Union on the one hand and India on the other, right? So there's a sort of willingness to go along with the Russian narrative, even as the images which are coming out of Ukraine, especially in the last 24 hours, given the death of people after medical facilities were struck, is shocking to people. And I think that the fact that India is not among those countries that is, working towards peace, or has no idea of how peace can be brought about other than to simply, tell Putin that, war is not the answer and so on. I think this is something which is disturbing to a lot of people.
Sure. There are elements of this that are a bit closer to home, though, as well. We know at least, for instance, 2 Indian nationals have died on the Ukrainian front line. Presumably that's just the tip of the iceberg. Is any of that being addressed?
This is a new element that has come to light in the last 6 to 8 months and has upset a lot of people, because the last thing you expect from a country with which you have historical ties and which the government of India has backed is to dupe Indian nationals into, in basically being taken to the front line. These are unemployed workers in India hired by unscrupulous labor sort of brokers and told that they're going to do manual work, and then they end up on the front line, sometimes even, in the firing line. And 2 Indian nationals have died. This is an issue that Mr. Modi was expected to raise. We understand unofficially from Indian sources in Moscow that Prime Minister Modi raised this with President Putin last night over dinner and got some kind of an assurance. I don't know what public messaging there will be on this, but I think that this has become a priority issue for Modi simply because of the bad press in India about these Indians being duped and dying over there. At least 2 dead. And this is also a problem in Nepal and for other countries too.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a little bit more then about what Modi might want from this visit. You mentioned there have been these talks with Putin. I mean, amid this ongoing Russian isolation by the West, Putin has been talking about this multipolar world. Does that create perhaps more leverage for countries like China and India for their own agendas, especially when it comes to sectors like energy and defense?
India has always been an advocate for multipolarity, but this has to be multipolarity based on on international law, on respect for sovereignty, respecting the territorial integrity of countries. There's no value in multipolarity if Russia is going to violate the territorial integrity of Ukraine with impunity, right? So somewhere down the line, there is a contradiction in the Indian position of wanting to stand for a better, more just world, and then on the other hand, not finding the words to condemn the invasion, even if India doesn't want to side with the US on the question of sanctions, right? So I think that India really has no view on how this war can be settled. Of course, India has a strong bilateral relationship. Apart from energy, there is an ongoing sort of arms relationship. There is nuclear collaboration. There is space collaboration. You have a large number of Indian nationals who are studying and working in Russia. So all of that is important for India. But one would have thought that a country of India's agility at the international level would have been able to nurture its bilateral relationship with Russia while at the same time finding the language and the words to take a clear view on the Russian invasion or aggression against Ukraine. India is the only major power, as far as I can tell, that is basically refusing to condemn Russia for what it's doing in Ukraine and refusing to condemn Israel for what it's doing in Gaza.
You mentioned, though, the agility when it comes to the international scene. This is surely a bit of a balancing act for Modi right now when it comes to Moscow and Washington?
I think that, of course, India values its ties with Russia and is not going to allow those ties to be broken under pressure from the West. This is very clear. And I think there is a broad consensus in India across all political parties that this is how it should be. Having said that, as I said, the challenge for Indian diplomacy is to have your bilateral relationship not go along with the US on the issue of sanctions, say, because the US is also taking steps which are prolonging the conflict, but at the same time taking a clear stand against the use of force in international relations, which is something that India historically has stood for. So its inability to find the words and to tell Russia that the goals it's pursuing in Ukraine are not acceptable is something which is a little bit astonishing, quite frankly.
We'll see what further emerges from day 2 of this trip. Siddharth Vadarajan there, the founding editor of The Wire, speaking to us from from New Delhi today. Thank you very much, Siddharth.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.